Get her out of here, security. My sister is a professional leech, and frankly, her unemployed scent is ruining the expensive champagne. Liam's voice boomed through the ballroom, amplified by the smug smirk he always wore like a crown. I stood frozen for a split second, not out of fear, but out of pure, white-hot fury. The guests at the Sterling Global New Year's Gala, the very company I built from the dirt while he was busy spending our inheritance, turned their heads. Some whispered behind gloved hands, others laughed. "Liam," I said, my voice low, a controlled simmer. "You really want to do this here in front of everyone? Do what Ava, remind you that you're a guest by pity alone." He stepped closer, leaning in so the scent of expensive scotch hit me. "You've spent 3 years finding yourself while I've been running this empire. You don't belong in a room where people actually work for a living. Go home, if you can still afford the Uber." The humiliation should have burned, but instead, it solidified. I looked around the penthouse ballroom, overlooking the glittering lights of Manhattan. Every crystal chandelier, every marble tile, every billion-dollar contract filed in the archives 30 floors below. It all belonged to me. But to the world, and to my narcissistic brother, I was Ava Sterling, the failure of the family. 3 years ago, I founded Sterling Global under a strict veil of anonymity. I used a shell corporation and appointed Marcus Thorne as the face of the company, the COO. I did it to prove I could build something without the Sterling name helping me. And I succeeded. The company was now worth over $850 million. 6 months ago, I made the mistake of hiring Liam. Our parents had passed, and he was drowning in debt. I thought giving him a senior VP position would help him find his feet. Instead, it gave him a platform to play king. Because I worked remotely and kept my name off the internal directory to observe the company culture, Liam actually believed I was just his deadbeat sister, living off a dwindling trust fund. "I asked you a question, Liam," I said, stepping into his personal space. I didn't back down. I never do. "Do you honestly think you're the reason this company saw a 22% increase in revenue this quarter?" Liam let out a bark of laughter, beckoning a few of his sycophant managers over. "Hear that, boys? The girl who can't even hold a job at a Starbucks is lecturing us on revenue. Tell me, Ava, did you read that in a magazine while you were lounging by the pool I pay for?" "You don't pay for anything," I snapped. The anger was bubbling up now, a volcanic pressure behind my ribs. "You are a glorified seat warmer who spends more on lunch meetings than you bring in through acquisitions." One of the managers, a snake named Bennett, whom I'd been planning to fire for weeks due to harassment complaints, stepped forward. "Miss Sterling, I think it's best you leave. Liam is the heartbeat of this firm. You're just baggage." "Baggage?" I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness. "Is that what you call the person who signed your last bonus check, Bennett?" The table of executives erupted in snickers. Liam shook his head, looking at me with feigned pity. "You're delusional. It's actually sad. Security. Please escort my sister to the service elevator. She's had a bit too much to drink and is starting to hallucinate that she's a CEO." 2 large men in suits approached. I felt the eyes of 500 of New York's elite on me. My heart was thundering, not with embarrassment, but with the thrill of the kill. I had seen enough. I had seen how my brother treated inferiors. I had seen how toxic my company had become under his brief, arrogant shadow. "Don't touch me," I told the security guards, my voice cracking like a whip. They actually hesitated. There was something in my eyes, the look of a woman who was about to burn a kingdom down to save the soil. I turned back to Liam, who was already turning away to grab another drink. "Liam," I called out. "What now? Ava more imaginary board meetings?" "Enjoy that drink," I said, a cold, predatory smile spreading across my face. Because it's the last thing you'll ever take from this company. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, the baggage is getting picked up, and the trash is getting taken out. Whatever you say, sis, get lost. He waved me off without looking back. I walked out of that ballroom through the front doors, not the service elevator. As I stepped into the crisp, freezing January air of New York City, I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Marcus, I said when he picked up. Boss, it's late. Is everything okay at the gala? No, it's settled. The silent partner protocol is over. I want a full board meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Cancel Liam's keycard. Freeze his corporate accounts. And Marcus. Yes, Ava. Prepare the termination papers for the entire North American executive suite. We're starting a fire tomorrow. I ended the call and looked up at the penthouse windows. The party was still going, but for Liam Sterling, the world was about to end, and I was going to be the one to watch it burn. The sun rose over the East River with a clinical, unforgiving brightness that seemed to mock the chaos I was about to unleash. I hadn't slept a wink. I spent the entire night in my home office, a glass-walled sanctuary in Brooklyn Heights, reviewing every expense report, every disparaging email, and every HR violation Liam and his boys' club had racked up over the last 6 months. The more I read, the more the fury tightened its grip on my throat. They hadn't just been arrogant, they had been predatory. Liam had authorized bonuses totaling $450,000 for his inner circle while denying the customer support team a basic cost of living increase. He had turned Sterling Global, my legacy, my blood, sweat, and tears, into a playground for his own mediocrity. Every time he called me unemployed or useless, he was likely doing it while signing away my money to his cronies. At 7:45 a.m., my black sedan pulled up to the front of the Sterling Tower. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel. As I stepped through the revolving doors, wearing a charcoal gray tailored suit and heels that sounded like rhythmic gunshots on the marble floor, the atmosphere shifted. "Morning, Ava," the head of security, Mike said. He looked at me with a mixture of pity. News of the Gala disaster had clearly spread. "Listen, I'm really sorry about last night. But Liam, he sent down a formal memo at midnight. He revoked your guest credentials. I'm not supposed to let you pass the turnstiles." I stopped and looked Mike directly in the eyes. "Mike, do you like your job? Do you like the way this company has been headed lately?" He blinked, startled. "Of course, Miss Sterling. It pays the bills, but it's been different lately. Tense. Then keep your eyes on the elevator and don't say a word," I said, sliding a black titanium card across the hidden master scanner, the founder's key. The light flashed a brilliant green. "And don't worry, Mike. By noon, the man who wrote that memo won't have the authority to bar a door in this building." I walked straight toward the main boardroom on the 40th floor. Through the glass walls, I could see them. Liam was there, draped over the head of the table, my seat, laughing loudly with Bennett and 2 other VPs. I pushed the heavy glass doors open. They swung wide with a forceful thud. "Morning, gentlemen," I said, my voice projecting a calm that was far more dangerous than a scream. Liam didn't even stand up. "Ava, are you actually serious right now? Did you sneak in through the freight elevator with the trash?" Bennett snickered, tapping a gold pen. "Maybe she's here to apply for the janitor position, Liam." I threw my leather portfolio down. Thwack. "Bennett," I said, "you've had 3 sexual harassment settlements paid out of company funds, $200,000 to bury your filth. Do you think that's a janitor-level mistake?" Bennett's face went ghostly pale. "What? How do you—" "And Liam," I turned to my brother, "you signed off on a $1.2 million shell contract with your girlfriend's mother. In this state, Liam, we call that embezzlement. It carries a very long prison sentence." Liam stood up his chair, screeching. "You're a nobody. I am the VP who is going to believe a girl who hasn't had a paycheck in years. I haven't had a paycheck because I signed them, Liam, I replied. At that moment, Marcus Thorne, the COO, walked in. He walked straight to me and bowed his head. The authorities are in the lobby, boss. The board is ready. The silence was deafening. Liam looked at Marcus, then at me. Boss Marcus, what the hell is this? This is Ava Sterling, Marcus said with disdain, the sole founder and CEO of this empire. And as of 8:01 a.m., your employment is terminated for cause. I leaned over the table inches from Liam's face. You called me a leech, Liam. I built this kingdom while you were sleeping off hangovers. You didn't just bite the hand that fed you. You tried to cut it off. Ava, wait. Get out, I snapped. You have 60 seconds. I turned to the window, watching the city. I didn't look back. The fire was burning, and for the first time, I felt truly warm. The aftermath of a corporate execution isn't silent. It's filled with the frantic clicking of keyboards and the hushed, terrified whispers of people who realized they had been serving the wrong god. As the security team escorted Liam and his disgraced cabinet toward the service elevators, the very ones he had suggested I use, the executive floor, felt like it was exhaling a breath it had held for 6 months. I didn't retreat to the CEO's office. Instead, I stayed in the boardroom watching the city through the glass. My hands were steady, but my heart was a drum of residual adrenaline. The legal team is downstairs, Ava, Marcus said, stepping softly into the room. He handed me a tablet. Liam is currently refusing to leave the lobby. He's demanding to speak to the real board. He still thinks there's a higher power he can appeal to. I swiped through the security footage on the tablet. There was Liam, my own blood, looking disheveled and wild-eyed, screaming at the same security guards he had mocked an hour ago. It was pathetic. It was tragic. And yet, I felt a cold satisfaction that frightened even me. Let him scream, I said, my voice echoing in the hollow room. In fact, call the precinct. If he isn't off the property in 5 minutes, have him trespassed. I want it on the public record. Understood. Marcus nodded, but he hesitated. And what about the staff? They're spooked, Ava. They've spent months watching Liam treat this place like a frat house. Now they find out the unemployed sister is actually the woman who signs their mortgage checks. They don't know if they're next on the chopping block. I turned away from the window. Gather everyone in the atrium. Not just the executives. Everyone. From the janitorial staff to the senior analysts. I want them all there in 10 minutes. The atrium of Sterling Global was a 4-story open space designed to inspire awe. When I walked onto the second-floor balcony overlooking the crowd, the silence was absolute. Hundreds of faces looked up, some with hope, most with sheer, unadulterated terror. I gripped the railing. I didn't need a microphone. The acoustics of my building were perfect. For the past few months, you've known me as Ava Sterling, the woman who occasionally brought coffee to her brother and sat in the back of meetings, I began. My voice was clear, carrying the weight of the $850 million empire I had built. You were told I was a failure. You were told I was baggage. I paused, letting the words sink in. I saw Chloe, a junior analyst Liam had bullied relentlessly, staring at me with wide eyes. The truth is, I built Sterling Global with a singular vision that talent and integrity are the only currencies that matter. My brother forgot that. He thought a name and a loud voice were enough to lead. He was wrong. And anyone who hived their ego to his anyone who thought they could climb the ladder by stepping on their colleagues has already been cleared out of this building. A collective shiver seemed to pass through the room. I am not my brother. I continued, my gaze hardening. I don't lead through fear, but I do lead through results. To those of you who did your jobs while being belittled, your patience is rewarded. Every person below the VP level is receiving a 15% salary adjustment effective immediately. We are taking the money saved from the bonuses of the men I just fired and putting it back into the heart of this company. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then a small, tentative cheer broke out from the back, growing until the atrium hummed with a different kind of energy. But let me be clear. I cut through the noise. The grace period for mediocrity is over. I am moving my office to this floor. I will be in the trenches with you. If you are here to work, you have a home. If you are here to play politics, start updating your resumes now. As the crowd dispersed, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Marcus. Ava, you have a visitor. Someone you didn't account for. Who? Your Aunt Diane. She's in your office, and she looks livid. I felt a fresh surge of resentment. Diane was the matriarch of the Sterling family, the one who had funded Liam's lifestyle for years, while telling me I should settle down and find a husband who could provide for me. Perfect, I muttered, straightening my blazer. I was wondering when the rest of the vultures would arrive. I walked toward my office, ready for the next round. The battle with Liam was just the opening act. If the family wanted a war over the Sterling crown, I was more than happy to give them one. I hadn't just built a company, I had built a fortress. And it was time to show them that the baggage had become the queen. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to my private office. Aunt Diane was perched on the edge of my Italian leather sofa, her designer handbag clutched in her lap like a weapon. At 64, she was the embodiment of old money arrogance, pearls, a permanent scowl, and the conviction that the world owed her everything simply for existing. Ava, she hissed, not even waiting for the door to click shut. Have you completely lost your mind? I just saw Liam being shoved into a police cruiser like a common criminal. The Sterling name is being dragged through the mud on every news outlet in Manhattan. I walked past her, my heels echoing on the hardwood, and took my seat behind the massive desk. I didn't invite her to sit. She was already uninvited in my eyes. The Sterling name isn't being dragged, Diane. I'm just cleaning the filth off it. Liam stole $1.2 million. That's not a family dispute. That's a felony. He is your brother, Diane shrieked, standing up. Families handle these things internally. We don't call the authorities. We don't humiliate our own blood in front of the help. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and looked at her with a chillingly calm expression. The help are the people who actually make this company run. Liam was the one who humiliated this family the moment he decided he was above the law. Where were you last night, Diane? Where were you when Liam called me a leech in front of 500 people at the Gala? Diane waved her hand dismissively. Oh, stop being so sensitive. That's just Liam's way. He has a big personality. He was trying to motivate you to do something with your life. By slandering me, by trying to have me thrown out of my own building. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He didn't know I owned this place, Diane. He thought I was defenseless. That's the problem with people like you and Liam. You only respect power once it's wrapped around your throat. Diane's face turned a mottled shade of purple. You think you're so clever, don't you? With your secret company and your little schemes. But you forget where that Sterling name came from. Our family's reputation is what gives this company value. If you destroy Liam, you destroy our standing in society. I am the standing in society now, I replied, my voice dropping an octave. I built an $850 million empire while you were busy sipping gin and tonics at the country club. My value doesn't come from a reputation you and Liam almost spent into bankruptcy. It comes from my brain and my grit. You're a cold, ungrateful girl, she spat. I will speak to the board. I will have this reversed. There are cousins, uncles. We have interests in the Sterling Trust. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my desk and slid it toward her. The Sterling Trust was liquidated 2 years ago to cover Liam's gambling debts in Macau. I'm the one who bought the debt, Diane. I didn't do it out of love. I did it so I could own every single piece of Sterling property left in this world, including the house you're living in. Diane froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking every bit her age. What? What are you talking about? Check your mail when you get home, I said, my voice as sharp as a razor. The foreclosure notice should be arriving this afternoon, unless, of course, you'd like to negotiate. I want the family to stay out of my business. I want a formal public statement from you and the rest of the elders supporting my leadership and condemning Liam's actions. You're blackmailing your own aunt, she whispered, horrified. I'm exercising my rights as a business owner, I corrected. I'm done being the quiet girl in the corner. From now on, anyone who stands in my way, family or not, will be dealt with. Now get out. I have a company to fix, and you're wasting my air. Diane looked at me for a long moment, searching for a spark of the niece she used to bully. She found nothing but the cold, hard steel of a CEO. She turned and stumbled out of the office, her pearls clinking nervously against her chest. As the door closed, Marcus entered from the side entrance. He looked at the empty seat, then at me. That was intense. I assume the foreclosure threat was real. Every word, I said, looking out at the skyline. I spent 3 years playing the ghost. Now I want them to feel my presence every time they close their eyes. The press is outside Ava, Marcus said, shifting the topic to the immediate crisis. They heard about the arrests. They want a statement from the mysterious CEO who finally showed her face. Tell them to wait, I said, a dark smile playing on my lips. I want them hungry. I want the world to know that the unemployed sister is gone. Ava Sterling has arrived, and she's just getting started. I felt a surge of adrenaline. The anger was still there, a roaring fire in my chest, but it was being channeled into something productive, something powerful. Liam was in a cell, Diane was in shock, and the world was finally looking at me. Marcus, I called out as he turned to leave. Yes, Ava. Change the locks on the executive lounge and find me the best PR firm in the city. We aren't just going to manage this story, we're going to write it. The lobby of Sterling Global looked like a battlefield covered in velvet and chrome. By the time I walked down the grand staircase at 2:00 p.m., the press had swelled into a frenzy. Flashes from cameras strobe-lit the glass walls, and a dozen microphones were shoved toward the security cordon. Ava over here, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal shouted. Is it true you've been the shadow CEO for 3 years? Miss Sterling, did you really have your own brother arrested for $1 million fraud? Another voice shrieked. I didn't stop. I walked with Marcus and 2 stone-faced security guards toward the podium we had set up in the center of the atrium. I didn't feel the nervousness that usually preceded public speaking. I felt like a predator returning to a territory that had always been mine. I reached the microphones and waited. The silence I projected was so heavy that the shouting died down in seconds. I looked directly into the main camera lens, the one broadcasting live to every financial news network in the country. My name is Ava Sterling. I began, my voice steady and resonant. And for 3 years, I have watched this company from the shadows. I built Sterling Global because I believed in a meritocracy. I believed that brilliance shouldn't need a loud voice or a silver spoon to be recognized. Unfortunately, I allowed sentiment to cloud my judgment. I leaned in closer, my eyes narrowing. I hired my brother, Liam Sterling, hoping he shared my vision. Instead, he chose to use this company as his personal piggy bank and a stage for his insecurities. He didn't just steal money. He tried to steal the dignity of the people who work here. Last night at our gala, he publicly insulted my character to hide his own failures. I paused, letting the weight of the gala incident hang in the air. The internet was already flooded with the video of Liam calling me a leech. Now, the world was seeing the leech in a $5,000 suit, standing in the heart of her own empire. As of today, I continued, Sterling Global is under new management mine. We have initiated a full internal audit. Anyone involved in the misappropriation of funds or the culture of harassment that flourished under the previous leadership has been terminated. We are not just fixing a company. We are purging a toxin. What about the family, Ava? A reporter yelled. Is it true your Aunt Diane is calling for a board vote to remove you? I smiled, and it wasn't a friendly one. My Aunt Diane is currently preoccupied with her own financial restructuring. There will be no board vote. I own 100% of the voting shares. The Sterling family is a beautiful legacy, but this company is a business. And in business, the only thing that matters is who holds the pen. I turned and walked away, ignoring the barrage of follow-up questions. Back in the safety of the elevator, Marcus exhaled a long breath. You just declared war on the entire Upper East Side, you know that, right? He asked, though he was smiling. They started the war, Marcus. I'm just finishing it, I replied. Did you get the files on the other VPs? Yes, it's worse than we thought. Marcus said, his face turning serious. He handed me a folder. Liam wasn't acting alone. He was being coached. Someone was feeding him information on how to bypass our internal controls. Someone with much more experience than a failed socialite. I opened the folder. My blood ran cold. The signatures on the Summit Logistics Shell Company weren't just Liam's. There were co-signatories from Blackwood Industries, our biggest competitor. He was selling us out. I whispered, the anger returning sharper than ever. He wasn't just stealing for himself. He was helping Blackwood dismantle us from the inside so they could buy us for pennies during a scandal. And the lead contact at Blackwood? Marcus pointed to a name at the bottom of the page. It was Julian Vane, the man I had almost married 4 years ago, the man who had disappeared right before I founded Sterling Global. I closed the folder and gripped it so hard my knuckles turned white. Liam hadn't just been a bully. He had been a traitor. And Julian, the man who knew my every weakness, was the one pulling the strings. He thought he could use my brother to break me, I said, looking at my reflection in the elevator doors. I looked fierce, dangerous, and completely done with being underestimated. He thought I was still the girl who cried when he left. What's the move, Ava? Change of plans? I said as the elevator doors opened to the executive floor. We aren't just purging the company. We're going on the offensive. Marcus, call our acquisitions team. I want a full breakdown of Blackwood's current debt. If Julian Vane wants to play games with my family, I'm going to buy his company and fire him on his own front lawn. The game had changed. It wasn't about a brother's insult anymore. It was about an industry-wide betrayal. And they were about to learn that Ava Sterling didn't just build companies, she destroyed enemies. The revelation of Julian Vane's involvement felt like a jagged piece of glass, twisting in an old, forgotten wound. 4 years ago, Julian hadn't just been my fiancé. He had been my mentor. He was the man who taught me how to read a balance sheet like a poem and how to spot a hostile takeover from a mile away. When he walked out of my life weeks before our wedding, I thought it was because I wasn't enough for his soaring ambition. Now, staring at the signatures on the Summit Logistics contract, the truth laid bare was far more sinister. He didn't leave because I was a failure. He left to wait for the exact moment I became a target worth destroying. He targeted Liam because he knew Liam was weak, vain, and desperate for the kind of validation he could never earn. I said, pacing the length of my office. The Manhattan skyline was beginning to glow with the amber hues of a cold winter sunset, but the air inside felt like a tomb. He fed Liam's ego until my brother was willing to sell my soul for a seat at a table that didn't even exist. Marcus sat at the conference table, the blue light from his laptop illuminating a face tight with concern. Blackwood Industries is overextended, Ava. Their play for the South American lithium market is bleeding them dry. If they could have crashed Sterling Global and absorbed our liquid assets, it would have saved Julian's skin. He wasn't just being cruel. He was being desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy, I snapped, stopping my pace to look at the city I had conquered. How much of our stock did Liam leak to their shell companies? About 4.5%, Marcus replied. Not enough for a takeover, but enough to cause a massive hemorrhage at the next shareholder meeting. If Julian goes public with those shares, while the press is feasting on Liam's arrest, our valuation will tank by 40% in a single day. Then we don't give him the day, I said. I'm going to have dinner with a ghost. I met Julian at the Gilded Cage, an ultra-exclusive restaurant in Chelsea, where the tables are spaced for privacy, designed for plotting murders or mergers. When I walked in, he was already seated, looking exactly like the man I once loved, impeccably tailored, with a smile that never quite reached his cold gray eyes. Ava, he said, rising to pull out my chair with a practiced grace that nauseated me. I must say the unemployed sister persona was a masterclass. I almost believed you had given up. Cut the crap, Julian, I said, refusing to touch the menu. I saw the wire transfers from Blackwood to Liam's offshore accounts. You didn't just break my heart. You tried to liquidate my future. Julian took a slow, agonizing sip of his wine. Business is a contact sport, darling. You were always too emotional. I knew that if I stayed, I'd eventually have to crush you. I thought leaving would give you a quiet life, but you built an empire. You forced my hand. I forced your hand. I laughed, a sharp sound that drew stares from the elite diners nearby. You manipulated a man with the intellectual capacity of a goldfish to steal from his own blood. That's not business, Julian. That's cowardice. It worked, didn't it? Julian leaned in, his voice dropping to a predatory whisper. I have 5% of your company. I have your brother in a cell for crimes I helped him commit. If you don't sell me another 46% at a steep discount, I'll ensure the audit shows you were complicit. The CEO who didn't know her brother was stealing millions. You'll look incompetent at best and a criminal at worst. I let a small predatory smile spread across my face. I leaned in, mirroring his posture. You think you have me cornered, Julian, but you forgot one detail. I own the debt on your Chilean lithium mines. I bought the portfolio through a proxy 3 months ago, and as of 5 minutes ago, I've called in the loan, all $300 million of it. The color drained from Julian's face. The calculated arrogance vanished. Enjoy the wine, Julian, I said, standing up, because by Monday you won't even own the suit you're wearing. I walked out into the night air, feeling the cold wind of victory. The morning after my dinner with Julian felt like the calm before a hurricane. By 8 a.m., my phone was a barrage of frantic notifications. News of the sterling liquidation of Julian's debt had leaked to the inner circles of Wall Street, and the sharks were starting to circle Blackwood Industries. But I wasn't celebrating yet. I was sitting in a dim, cold visitation room at the Manhattan Detention Complex. Across from me, separated by a thick sheet of plexiglass, sat Liam. He looked unrecognizable. Gone was the expensive silk tie and the smug superior grin. His hair was greasy, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his sallow skin. Ava, he croaked, pressing his hands against the glass. You have to get me out of here. The lawyers say the DA is looking at 15 years for the embezzlement and the shell company. They think I'm the mastermind. You know I'm not that smart, Ava. Please. I looked at him with a detachment that surprised even me. I didn't feel the burning rage of the Gala anymore. I just felt a profound, hollow disappointment. You're right about one thing, Liam. You aren't that smart, but you were greedy enough to let a snake like Julian Vane whisper in your ear. You sold me out for a few offshore accounts and a title you didn't earn. Julian promised me I'd be the face of the merger, Liam pleaded, his voice cracking. He said you were wasting the family fortune, that you were just sitting on the money while he could make us billionaires. I did it for the family, Ava. Don't you dare use that word. I snapped, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. You didn't do it for the family. You did it because you couldn't stand the fact that your loser sister was 1,000 times more capable than you. You enjoyed slandering me. You enjoyed watching security try to throw me out of a building I built from nothing. Liam slumped back, a sob escaping his throat. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll testify against Julian. Just get the charges dropped. Mom and Dad wouldn't want this. I leaned in my face, inches from the glass. Mom and Dad didn't raise a thief. And as for Julian, I don't need your testimony to take him down. I've already dismantled his financing, but I will offer you one deal and one deal only. Liam looked up, a spark of pathetic hope in his eyes. You sign a full confession, I said. You detail every meeting, every email, and every cent Julian funneled through you. In exchange, I'll have my legal team argue for a reduced sentence, maybe 5 years with a chance for parole. But there's a condition. Anything, he whispered. You sign over your entire inheritance, every cent of the Sterling Trust that you haven't already squandered. You leave the city the moment you're out, and you never use the Sterling name again. To the world and to me, you are dead. Do you understand? The silence in the room was suffocating. Liam stared at me, realizing for the first time that his little sister was gone, replaced by a titan who didn't know the meaning of the word mercy. Slowly, he nodded. I'll sign, he choked out. I stood up, signaling the guard. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back as the heavy steel door creaked open. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk, Marcus was waiting in the car. Did he take it? He took it, I said, sliding into the leather seat. He's broken. But Julian won't be that easy. He's going to fight Marcus. He's going to try to burn everything down on his way out. He's already started, Marcus said, handing me his phone. He just released a statement. He's claiming that you used insider information to manipulate the debt purchase. He's calling for an SEC investigation into you. I looked at the headlines. Julian was trying to flip the script, painting me as the corporate raider who used her own brother as a pawn to destroy a competitor. It was a desperate move, but in the court of public opinion, it could be lethal. He wants to play dirty? I asked, a dark, dangerous smile crossing my lips. Fine. Marcus, remember that file we found in the encrypted drive, the one with the names of the politicians Julian was bribing to get those Chilean mining permits? Marcus's eyes widened. Ava, if we release that, it won't just destroy Julian. It'll cause a national scandal. It could tank the market for the entire sector. I don't care, I said, staring straight ahead as we drove past the Sterling Tower. He tried to take my life, my company, and my name. I'm not just going to beat him. I'm going to erase him. Call the PR team. Tell them to get ready for a midnight drop. If the world wants a scandal, I'll give them a masterpiece. The fire was spreading, and for the first time I realized I didn't care who got burned as long as I was the one holding the matches. The air in my penthouse was thick with the scent of overpriced espresso and the ozone of a dozen running servers. It was 2:00 a.m., the hour when the rest of the world slept, and the powerful decided who would wake up with nothing. Marcus was hunched over a laptop at my kitchen island. His tie discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up in a way that screamed exhaustion. The encryption on the permit file is broken, Marcus said, his voice raspy. Ava, I need you to see this before we hit send. It's not just bribes. It's a roadmap of corruption. Julian didn't just pay off local officials in Chile. He funneled $50 million through a PAC linked to Senator Higgins right here in D.C. I walked over and leaned over his shoulder. The names, the dates, the wire transfer codes, it was all there. Julian Vane hadn't just been playing at corporate espionage. He was an architect of systemic rot. This wasn't just about a business rivalry anymore. This was about a criminal enterprise hiding behind a silk tie. If we release this, Marcus whispered, looking up at me with genuine concern, the SEC won't just investigate you. The FBI will raid Blackwood Industries by dawn, but the market will panic. Sterling Global's stock will take a hit just by being in the same headline as this scandal. We could lose hundreds of millions in valuation overnight. Let it take a hit, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. I'd rather own 100% of a company worth half its value than 100% of a company that lives in fear of a man like Julian. I'm done being a hostage to his secrets. Do it, Marcus. Release the Kraken. With one final heavy keystroke, the data was blasted to every major news bureau from New York to London. The next 4 hours were a blur of adrenaline and chaos. By 6 a.m., the world was on fire. The Vane files were trending globally. Senator Higgins had already issued a panicked no comment before disappearing into a private jet. And at Blackwood Industries, the stock had dropped 60% in pre-market trading, a vertical line of red on every financial monitor. I was standing in my office at Sterling Tower, watching the sunrise hit the skyscrapers when the elevator doors chimed. I expected the FBI. I expected my legal team. I did not expect Julian Vane to walk through the doors looking like a man who had survived a plane crash only to find himself in the middle of a desert. "You've killed us both, Ava," he screamed, slamming his fists onto my mahogany desk. "Do you have any idea what you've done? There are people involved in those permits who don't care about lawsuits. They care about silence. You've put a target on your own back." I didn't blink. I didn't even stand up. "Are you threatening me, Julian? After everything you've done, you're coming into my office to play the scary man routine? It's pathetic. You're a cornered rat squeaking about his cage." "I was trying to build a legacy," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I did it for the Sterling name." "No." I stood up my chair, rolling back with a sharp click. "You did it for your own ego. You used my brother. You slandered my name. You don't get to use the word legacy. Now get out before the agents downstairs lose their patience." As the FBI led Julian away in handcuffs 10 minutes later, I felt a deep, quiet peace. The baggage was gone. The weight of everyone else's expectations and betrayals had been incinerated in the fire I started. The war was over, but the reconstruction was just beginning. By 10 a.m., the Sterling Tower felt less like a corporate headquarters and more like a fortress under reconstruction. While the world outside was obsessing over the televised arrest of Julian Vane and the political fallout of the Vane files, I was focused on the internal rot that had allowed my brother to thrive. I hadn't just fired the leadership. I was about to dismantle the culture that protected them. I sat at the head of the boardroom table. Marcus sat to my right, looking sharper than he had in weeks. Across from us sat the remaining 3 board members, men in their late 60s who had been hand-picked by my father and kept in place by Aunt Diane. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and deep-seated resentment. "Ava, this is unprecedented." Arthur Pendergast, the eldest of the 3, began. He cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he held a printed copy of the morning's headlines. "You've decimated our stock price. You've invited federal scrutiny into our dealings. We are the Sterling legacy, and you've turned us into a tabloid scandal." I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and let a cold silence fill the room. I let it stretch until Arthur began to fidget. "The legacy you're so concerned about, Arthur, was a rotting corpse. My brother was stealing millions under your noses. Julian Vane was using our infrastructure to bribe foreign officials. And where were you? You were playing golf and collecting 6-figure dividends while a woman you called unemployed was actually keeping this company afloat from the shadows." "We didn't know," another board member, Harold, protested. "Liam provided us with reports. Reports you never bothered to verify because you liked the way he flattered you," I snapped. I slid 3 folders across the table. "Inside those folders, you'll find my formal demand for your resignations, effective immediately." Arthur's face turned a deep shade of crimson. "You can't fire the board, Ava. We represent the shareholders. We have a fiduciary duty." "I own 100% of the voting shares, Arthur." I interrupted, my voice as sharp as a guillotine. "I am the shareholders. And as for your fiduciary duty, you failed it the moment you let Liam Sterling sign off on a $1.2 million shell contract without asking a single question. If you don't sign those resignations now, I will file a civil suit for negligence and claw back every penny of the bonuses you've received in the last 5 years. I'll make sure the SEC investigates your personal portfolios next." The room went silent. The three men looked at each other, realizing that the quiet Sterling girl they had ignored for years was now the shark in the tank. One by one, they reached for their pens. The sound of their signatures hitting the paper was the most satisfying music I had heard all year. "Good," I said, standing up and collecting the folders. "Marcus will show you to the service elevator. I believe that's the exit my brother preferred for unimportant people." As they shuffled out, looking like defeated ghosts, Marcus turned to me. "That's the last of them. The board is clear. The executive suite is empty. But Ava, we have a massive gap in leadership. We have 200 frightened employees downstairs and a market that's waiting for a sign of stability." "The sign of stability is me," I said, walking to the window. "I'm not hiring more suits from the country club, Marcus. I want you to promote from within. I want Chloe, that junior analyst who survived Liam's bullying, to head the new compliance department. I want the people who actually do the work to lead the company." "And what about you?" Marcus asked. "You've been the ghost for 3 years. Are you ready to be the face of this every single day?" I looked at my reflection in the glass. The anger was still there, but it had transformed. It wasn't a fire that burned me anymore. It was the engine that drove me. "I'm not just going to be the face, Marcus. I'm going to be the warning. I want every competitor, every family member, and every bully to look at this building and know that the baggage has finally taken over the ship." "Get the press release ready," I said, a predatory smile touching my lips. "Tell them the CEO is holding an open town hall tomorrow. No scripts, no filters, just the truth." The morning of the town hall arrived with a crisp, biting cold that seemed to sharpen the edges of Manhattan's skyline. Inside the Sterling Tower atrium, the air was electric. Hundreds of employees stood in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. For the first time in years, the boys' club laughter that usually echoed through these halls was gone, replaced by the serious murmur of a company in transition. I walked onto the stage without a teleprompter, without a script, and without the shadow of a man to hide behind. I looked out at the crowd, seeing Chloe Mike from security and dozens of others who had been sidelined by Liam's arrogance. 3 years ago, I stood in this lobby and imagined a company that valued merit over lineage. I began my voice clear and steady. I failed that vision by letting my brother turn this place into his personal playground. I allowed my silence to be interpreted as weakness. But today, that silence ends. I paused, making eye contact with the front row. Sterling Global is no longer a family business. It is a world-class institution. We have purged the corruption, we have neutralized the threats, and we have reclaimed our capital. But more importantly, we have reclaimed our integrity. The applause that followed wasn't the polite forced clapping, usually reserved for executives. It was a roar, a release of months of suppressed tension. After the meeting, I returned to my office. The mahogany desk was clear except for a single handwritten letter. It was from Liam, sent from his holding cell. I didn't open it. I didn't need to hear his excuses or his pleas for mercy. I picked up my lighter, watched the corner of the envelope catch fire, and dropped it into the marble ashtray. I watched until it was nothing but gray flakes. Aunt Diane had been silenced by the foreclosure of her estate. Julian Vane was facing a decade in federal prison, and my brother was a ghost of a past I had outgrown. The unemployed sister was dead. In her place stood a woman who had built an $850 million empire twice, once in the dark and once in the light. Marcus walked in holding a final report. "The markets have stabilized, Ava. In fact, our stock surged 8% this morning. The investors love the new Sterling transparency, and Julian's board They've officially filed for bankruptcy. We're in the clear. We aren't just in the clear, Marcus, I said, looking out at the city I had finally made mine. We're in control. What's the next move, boss? He asked with a smile. I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door. The next move is to build something they can't even dream of. Let's get to work. I walked out of the office, the sound of my heels on the marble sounding like a heartbeat, strong, rhythmic, and unstoppable. I had started as baggage, but I had finished as the sovereign. And as I stepped into the elevator, I didn't look at my reflection to see if I looked the part. I already knew I was the only one who could play it. Don't let anyone's words define your worth. If people look down on you while you're quietly working on your dreams, let them. Silence is power when you're building something big. Be kind, but don't be a doormat. Protect your hard work and set firm boundaries, even with family. The best way to prove them wrong isn't by arguing, it's by succeeding so clearly that they can't ignore you. Stand tall and be the boss of your own life. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this story. If Ava's journey inspired you today, please show some love by hitting that like button and dropping a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming stories. Your support means everything. See you in the next one.